We're going to replace some tires on this motorcycle today. We're going to show you how to jack it up, remove your tires, and then bring your new one to the shop and have them put it on for you. Taking these tires off isn't too bad. This is a 2001 Honda Shadow Spirit, the 1100C. Look how bad these tires are. I got a tread depth gauge. See if we can tell what this tread is. Get this camera to focus here. Less than 1 millimeter. Pretty much 0 millimeters. This tire is trashed. It's completely unsafe to ride on. Look, it's even cracking and stuff. I wonder what the date code on this guy is. Scoot over to the side of the tire. Look for this 4-digit code, 5208. It's upside down right now. Hold on. Okay, magic of video editing. 5208, meaning the 52nd week of 2008 this tire was manufactured. It's almost a 2009 tire, but still almost 14 years old. Let's do the same thing to this front tire. Get in here now. You can kind of see some of this cracking, not quite as bad, but let's just see how much tread depth do we have. Sitting right at 2 millimeters. Yeah, just at the 2 millimeter line. I think 1.5 millimeters is the lowest the manual says you can ride. So this one's nearing the end of its life, but the cracking, this tells me that it's an old tire. This one's much harder to read. Let me see if I can get a picture up here. And what you'll see in the picture here is 51st week of 2012. Yeah, it's 4 years newer than the other one, but it's still too old to be riding on. This is 2022 that we're doing this. Just for comparison's sake, I've got my brand new tires here. Same kind of tires, these Dunlap 404s. Good little economy tire. A brand new tire has on the rear between 6 and 7 millimeters. And on the front, brand new tire, middle of the tread pattern, has about 4 millimeters. 4 millimeters on the front, ours is at 2, it's only about half worn, but this one's 6 brand new and ours is at 0. Yeah, that's real dangerous. Now lifting a bike is pretty much the same on any model. You're just gonna scoot under here and find the bottom of your engine, and that's gonna be where you're gonna put your jack. Now some bikes have little supports, you can even put something under here to help you lift it, but it's not really necessary. As long as we just get it right here, we're going to get it up in the air, and then in order to increase our stability, we're even going to throw a little jack stand up there where my fancy lights are. I suppose everybody's got their way of doing it, but the way I do it is I just leave the bike on the kickstand, come from the opposite side, push it all the way in until it hits that kickstand, and then I just start pumping it up. While it's pumping up, I'm going to pull the bike toward me so that I keep it centered on the jack. And I need both my hands to do this. Here's what I'm talking about. The front's well and good off the ground, that's fine, but the back is still on the ground. However, we can come back here and we can just lift up on this, and it lifts the whole bike up. So we want to get that one up in the air, and maybe a little jack stand underneath there just to keep everything nice and secure. And I'll show you how I do it. Just come onto this rear swing arm, and I like to put one on each side so it's more stable. You know, it doesn't rock off of one jack stand if you put one in the middle or something like that, but that feels pretty secure. Now I'm going to lower this down onto the lock, and good jacks will have a little lock here. Up is the unlock position, down is the lock. So if it's down and we slowly lower this down, we see that front start to come down. It actually came down too far. My bike wasn't up high enough. I'm going to try this again. Something like that. So again, here, if I loosen this all the way, it's irrelevant because the thing is sitting on its locks. So I know that I'm going to be safe to work on this bike. Now I can dig into what we're getting into. Taking the front tire off is going to be step one. And there's a few things we're going to have to do. This is the Speedo cable that runs along down here. We're going to have to remove that. Just a little screw there, not too hard. And then we're going to come over to this side of the bike, and we're going to remove a couple of bolts here. We're going to remove these two bolts that pinch, and this one bolt that's for the axle. Now the way the axle sits in here, it slides in this way. This little side is too big to push all the way through, so when the nut grabs it, it squeezes that together. Make sure your front tire doesn't fall off. Now if we weren't going to replace the whole rotor and we only wanted to do the pads, you would just take these two bolts out and you can actually just pop this whole guy off. These are just your slide pins down here. So the whole caliper just pops off and you can replace the pads that way. But since we've got to replace this rotor, we're going to show you how to take the whole front tire off and do it the long way. A little I suppose I should tell you, there's a couple of pinch bolts on this side as well. So you're going to have to take those out just like you do on the other side, because that's what pinches the fork to the axle. But take a look at this Speedo cable. That's getting there pretty clean. And I've been cleaning this up. I actually might just finish cleaning it up and put it on Craigslist as is. Nope, not going to do that. That would be dirty. Now look how easy this is. This screw pops out and the speedo cable just pops out like that. That's the little shaft that drives the cable. Your cable just, it'll hang right there and you can pull it up out of the way so it doesn't get in the way of all the other jobs. I like to just tuck it back there or something. Then we can keep going. But before we do, something we always do at Nice Guys is just toss the bolt back in the same hole you took it out of. Easiest way to keep track of everything. These pinch bolts, I got them loose like that on both sides. They're going to be a 12 millimeter, and then these brake caliper bolts are going to be a 14 millimeter, and this guy here on the axle nut's going to be a 22 millimeter. So I went ahead and put that back on there because I'm going to use the actual bolt here to push that axle through a little bit. We'll show you that in just a second. But these guys here can come all the way out. You can do that on both sides. These little bolts here for the brake calipers can come all the way out, and then the brake caliper is just going to slide off here. And before I do that, I'm going to use both hands because I don't want it to just hang. I'm going to remove it from its clip and I'm going to hang it by a bungee cord. Just like that. Went around the handlebar because I'm not taking the handlebars off. So it'll be nice and safe there. And then I'll just let it hang kind of right like that. This guy here, you're going to want to keep that bolt in just a little bit because you're going to have to start smacking it with the hammer to push that guy out on the other side. You got a little bit of space here, and you might not be able to just pull it by hand, but you get a screwdriver and put it down there. Kind of like this. Take the bolt out of that end, use your screwdriver, and just start working it out. Working it out. And I already felt the tire drop a little bit, so this is where I'm going to have to use two hands because I'm going to have to hold the tire while I work that all the way out, and it'll drop out, no problem. Front tire popped off, no problem. This is going to be ready to send to the tire shop, and this down here, this is what your axle looks like. Now, this one's still dirty, so I'm going to clean it up here. We're going to check it for scoring, and you can even check it for run out to see if it's worn. This is my axle. Now, it has some scoring on it, but it's not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and just run this one again. It didn't have any run out, and run out is if there's any high spots in here from warping, and you checked out with the dial indicator. But yeah, it felt pretty good, so I'm going to just run it again. The rotor side of the wheel's got a little spacer here. That's going to come out again. We're going to clean it up before we put it back in. And then you can start to check the wheel bearings in here. And if you hear any noise or feel any grinding, they're bad. But shh, listen. That's super smooth. Those wheel bearings are just fine. Now we're going to pop off this rotor for the brake job. The other side of the tire has got this piece. The spacer doubles as the speedometer cable, what operates that. So we're going to clean that up really good too. We're going to clean up in here really good. And again, we're going to check our wheel bearing, make sure we didn't miss anything, but no, it feels pretty good. These guys will be pretty tight. You want to make sure you torque them down correctly when you put them in, but you can do that to get them out. Once you get them out, rotor pops off. And the reason I'm doing the rotor right now, before I do the tire, is because I want to make sure this thing balances with the rotor that's not scored or warped, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pop this guy in the trash and go get my new one. Got our new rotor. I'm going to put some Loctite on these guys, and the rotor's got two sides to it. You got one side that's got a little beveled edge there, and then the other side is completely flush. So flush side down, blue Loctite on those because you see they have a little bit of red Loctite from the factory, so we're going to just replace it with blue. All back on, torque to spec, did the star pattern, boom, 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 boom. And let's get her back on the bike. Don't forget you got your spacer here. This goes on the brake side. We got our speedo gear. Now there's two washers. One goes down in the bottom, so that guy's gonna sit in there, and then this other washer sits on top of that. But you got to pack this thing with grease. NLG number 2, really any grease, just make sure it's gonna be packed in there fairly tight, something like that. And then that's gonna go on that side there, but first I gotta clean out that. It's gross. You got this, all this crud built up in there. Real nice tire from the tire shop here. This guy's a 2022. Everything sounds good. And how we did this, you put it into place. You want this speedo gear to be indexed to this little notch on the side of the fork tube. So that way the bottom of this is in position for where it needs to be for the speedo cable to be hooked back up. And you push the axle through. You gotta really just go after that guy there. Get yourself an impact mallet. Whew, that was tight. Push the axle through, tighten these two down to about 18 foot-pounds, 17, 18 foot-pounds. Then put your nut on, or your bolt on, bolt goes to 43 foot-pounds, and then these 2 bolts at 18 foot-pounds. Now we are ready to get that caliper back on. We got to change our pads out first though. This guy, you got to compress this caliper. So this is the piston, and it's a dual piston caliper. These are your old pads. So I'm going to squeeze a pry bar in between there and just push on this pad until this piston goes back through. In between those 2 pads to push against the far pad so it pushes that piston back in. You can see this close one all the way in there. That far one, it might have just a little bit more to go. On the side of this, you're going to have this little plug, just a flathead screwdriver to get that off, and that's number 5 hex bolt. That will remove this pin so that these old pads can come out. And if you look, new pads have these little holes. That's what indexes the pin so the pads get put on the right place. Quick new to old comparison here. Yeah, there wasn't much life left on these old ones. These little nicks are from me prying on it. That's why you want to use the old pads. Slap these guys back in here. I did clean off the pin just a little bit so that it's nice and fresh and will slide easily. That's what it looks like installed. They'll have a little bit of wiggle room till you get it on the rotor. These holes are designed such a way that if you tried to put this pad on this side, the hole would be facing straight up. So you can only put them on one way. You want to make sure the side of this is indexed appropriately to that groove. Same thing on the other side. Just make sure it's all the way it should be and slap her on your rotor. Tighten your caliper bolts down to about 30-ish foot-pounds, and then you want to slide your grommet back in there so your brake line holds tight. And if you took it off, make sure you put that little bolt back, holds the brake line up here. Now that we're done with the front brakes, we're not going to be touching this rotor anymore. I like to grab a little brake cleaner and just spray it down. Then we'll wipe it down, make sure it's nice and clean. Before you go ride, just like a car, you got to pump your brakes to get this front brake working the way that it should. Rear tire, pulling this one off is just about the same. I think Honda calls this a stopper arm. And you got to take the little cotter pin out of here. This nut comes off and then this pops off. And then you're going to disconnect the brake. You're going to pull the nut off here, and then this just slides out so that the brake cable's out of the way. You can leave the arm on the drum. This is just another little pinch nut there that you can remove. And then from this side, you've got this axle nut. That's for the axle. You take that off and the axle will push through, at which point we can remove this collar. And once we remove this collar, the rear tire will be able to shift over to disconnect from the final drive over there. So it just, you take all that out and the tire goes boop and then boop. This guy's a 12. This guy up here is a 12. This is a 14. All of those are loose, so we can just go ahead, pop that guy off. Then this, had to use 2 hands for just a second. The little middle of that part comes out so you can keep those together. Remember what we said, if you can, just keep everything together like this because it makes your life easier when it comes time to put this back together, especially if you have to walk away from the project for a little while. Got a couple of washers, one rubber, one metal that come off with that guy. So we'll take that off, slide it down, pop that washer back in with the bolt, thread the nut on a little bit together when we need it. Pop that guy off. This axle nut was a 27. And again, I leave it on just a little bit because then you can throw your deep well socket on and just give her a little rap-a-tap-tap. Finish pulling it off all the way. You can see the axle's starting to come out, so we can keep working it out till we can get that spacer out, and then this whole thing just goes boop, boop. Take a look now. Everything's out. That spacer's out. Axle's out. And it's starting to separate now from that final drive. So it should just pop out here soon. And then this brake system will pop out as well. Right like that, you can tell this is the side that goes on the final drive because it's got the gears. And then this is our brake side. And check this out. The whole brake system here just pops out. And you can replace on those shoes if you need to. Most times you won't need to, but this is a used bike and I don't know who rode it last. So I'm going to just put new shoes on there. It's easy enough. Clean up your drum and again, check your wheel bearings. Starting to get loose, but still okay. I'll just remember next time I do tires, I'm going to buy a wheel bearing for this guy here. If you've ever done drum brakes on a car, you're in for a treat. All I did, clean up my drum here, make sure it's not scored. Everything looks okay. No hot spots. That would be where you see the rainbow metal, and it all looks pretty good. Now, the reason motorcycle brakes on the drums are so much easier is they come pre-assembled like this. I pulled this out of the box like this. Springs are already attached. All you need to do is remove these cotter pins, and then you can pop this plate off. These pads come straight out. You pop the new ones in, put new cotter pins in, and you're good to go. Having kind of a difficult time here. It's a lot tighter than I was expecting, so I'm gonna remove this little brake cam. This is what actuates the rear brakes when you push on the pedal. It just turns them out like that. I took that bolt out. This lever just slides off. It just pushes through like this. You use two hands, pull these shoes apart, and then push with your thumb on that cam, and it should come right out. Got those out. I'm gonna go in here and clean these up really good. Maybe spray them with just a tiny bit of fluid film so that these new ones slide on just fine. The old ones came out with the little hooks facing out, facing that way. So I'm gonna install the new ones the same way. I'm not sure if it matters or not, but it just makes sense to do it the way you took it out. This just got real fiddly. I couldn't quite get it all to line up. So what I did is I just installed that pin in there, and I figure it should all just kind of drop in. Yep, that turned out really good. Used a little rubber mallet to help me get it all on there, but that was not a problem at all. I just got to clean up a little bit of that grease I got on the brake shoe there. Put our plate back on, some brand new cotter pins. Cotter pins are one of those things that I don't reuse cotter pins because, well, they always get dinged up in the removal. And they cost about 3/10 of a penny, so you might as well just put new ones in. On this side, we had a little felt washer that goes all the way in. This little guy is a wear indicator. And if you look close, you can see it's got a wide tooth right there. And that wide tooth aligns to the wide tooth on the sprocket. They make it this way so you can only put it on one way. When you go to put it all back together, it indicates the proper wear setting. You pop your lever back on, and then you're good to go. When you go to reinstall this lever, pay attention now. There's a couple of punch marks on the lever and then the cam, and that's where you're gonna line it up. You can get it a tooth or two off. Like that would be one tooth off, and that's gonna make things wonky. So make sure you're paying attention there and get it in the right spot. Brake just sits in there during installation. Let's go put this guy back in the bike. When you're going to reinstall this, you're gonna wanna clean out all the grease in there. And these guys here, put new grease, just like we did on the front speedo cable. Just like that. Put a little on this side too, just to make sure things are nice and lubricated. Once you get the rear wheel on mostly, you see it's still got a lot of wiggle. This is because, whoa, we didn't have the axle in yet. That's a 1 knee, 1 foot job to hold all this so I don't drop it again. This little spacer is gonna slide up in there, and then rear axle is gonna go through. Just a little, look at that, starting to poke through there. Man, I should have cleaned that up while I had the chance, but I'll do that when I change the fluid there. Before you get the rear wheel all buttoned up here, you're gonna wanna leave everything loose so you can get your brake aligned. And then after your brake's aligned, you're gonna get this stopper arm back on, and then you're gonna torque the axle nut to 60 foot-pound. You adjust your rear brakes here with this guy, and you want about 3/8 of an inch, no more than an inch of free play in the pedal. And I think this is a job well done, fellers. We got the new tire on front, the new tire on back. We got new brakes up front. We got new brakes in back. We did our fork seals. That's a different video, so go check that one out. Remember how this guy was leaking? It looked all terrible. Well, that's all better. And I think we can lower this down and maybe go for a test ride. Almost forgot to put my speedo cable back on. That's why you want to do 3 or 4 walk-arounds before you go for your first test ride.